Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is questions and answers number 27, based on the return to planet Haven. Before we get into it, real quick, we have a few new patrons that join the other wonderful people who support this channel. Mark Booser and Mystery X9988. There's just something about that handle I really like. At any rate, they're both Astral Masters supporting Astral Club. If it's something that you think you'd like to become a part of, you'll find a link in the description. Next up, if you're interested in a private lesson with me to learn how to astral project or just increase your own projections, your control of them, the quantity of them, I'd be more than happy to help you out, and you'll find an email for more information in the description. Let's get started. Number one, Chrome said that the root communication network on Haven sounds like something mushrooms here on Earth do. If you recall, the way the Havenites evolved was eventually some plants figured out how to successfully respond to their predator, which was this insect that would suck out their precious life fluids, and they started using sound to mask their location. My guess is that these insects, which are now extinct on the planet, use some sort of sound locating technology. Now, I know our insects here on Earth use a variety of methods to get around and to locate their prey, but perhaps on this planet they were using maybe some sort of echolocation, like our bats do here on Earth. I don't know. It's hard to say. But at any rate, the Havenites found that this sound worked to mask them. And as they evolved, this root system connected all the different plants in given areas, and eventually, over the whole planet, the information on how to defend themselves was disseminated throughout this root network. I did some research after reading Chrome's statement, and I found one particularly interesting article: the Wood Wide Web, Underground Fungi-Plant Communication Network, July 24th, 2020. It's a very long, very interesting article. It's written a little bit more from a scientific standpoint, which I appreciate. I hate the pop articles where they generalize everything and try to dumb it down so that the lowest common denominator can understand it, while at the same time watering down the actual validity of the information. At any rate, one particular paragraph that caught my attention was: fungi use their branching and arm like membranes to build a communication network called the mycelium that connects individual plants and even the whole ecosystem. It's a very interesting article. If you'd like to read it, I will have a link to this article in the description. Next up, number two, and I hope I don't butcher this name too badly. Abdullahi Amin ask, in reference to your healing and contact with the beings on Haven, aren't there risks involved in working with extraterrestrials? Yes, there certainly is always risk when you're dealing with, when you're dealing with other humans, much less when you're dealing with beings of a race that are completely alien from you, in that they evolved on a completely different planet. You really can't get any more alien to humans than that. Even those well intentioned may misinterpret our actions, or perhaps we would misinterpret theirs, as various races proceed from different histories, beliefs, customs, assumptions, prejudices, and worldviews. If you think about it, I mean, we here on Earth, humans, we have infinitely more in common with one another in that we all have the same senses, for instance, so that we all perceive the world in very similar ways. Now, how we interpret those signals is where things get a little different, but as humans, we have infinitely more in common than we would in or with an alien species, and we certainly have enough misunderstandings to deal with here on Earth, just between fellow humans. So yes, it's extraordinarily difficult when you deal with any type of an alien species or individual. However, the inhabitants of Haven, though, as I said, were thoroughly alien to me, because they were a plant-based organism that evolved to a point where it's ready to go to the fourth dimension, and they can freely kind of go back and forth using an energy form. But they were extremely open and honest to me. They came across as innocent as a 4-year-old. When you're dealing with telepathic thoughts, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to lie. You can shield thoughts away from another being if you're skilled at telepathy on the astral, for instance. But lying just doesn't really work that well. And you can tell when someone is sectoring off a portion of their consciousness, whether they're holding back something. You can feel it by its absence. It's hard to explain in more physical terms. I have only rarely observed such openness in other species. I took a chance and I trusted them. And they me. Let's face it, they're trusting me too. Here I am from this alien creature from another planet whom they have never met before. So they're putting a lot of trust in me as well. And personally, I believe I got the better of the arrangement. So I have no regrets. However, you want to be very careful when you're dealing with species outside of humans. Like I said, you got to be careful dealing with humans too. But yeah, it's important to really understand communication, to be trusting, to be understanding. Reagan said, President Reagan, trust but verify. Maybe that's kind of a good way to phrase that. At any rate, it's a very perilous process communicating with aliens. Even when you have telepathy, still you get images, and they may interpret an image they're sending me one way, whereas I see it the exact same image, maybe even with some feelings in there somewhere. But I perhaps interpret it a different way because I'm coming from my own set of prejudices and assumptions and customs and what have you. So it's, I've mentioned in the past that I often feel, even when communicating with, especially when communicating with other species, if not other humans, that I'm missing something, that we're communicating telepathically. I'm getting a basic idea, but I'm missing the nuances. For instance, their crystal cathedral, I interpret it as a holy healing center, which was probably my earthly way of digesting its purpose. But I had the feeling that it was much more than that to them. But there was no way for me, with my earthly knowledge and experience, to interpret it, or much less express it in English, in a way different than I just did. Victor Tavares, in number 3, asks, do you know where Haven is located in the galaxy? I have no idea where Haven is located. I found them, you might want to say, on a certain level by accident. On another level, perhaps not. At any rate, I know their ident. But that doesn't mean I know their location in the sky. I know how to get there because I know what it feels like to be there. I've got the ident. But I couldn't point to a star and say, oh, they're the fourth planet circling around that star. I really can't do that. It's kind of like being somebody who knows a place so well that you can get there blindfolded, but maybe you couldn't necessarily give directions to someone else. I don't know. It's very odd, but that's the best way I can explain it. Number 4, and on ask, how can normal humans achieve telepathic communication ability? Well, the easiest way I know is through a lot of astral projection and a lot of practice using telepathy while astral projecting. When you're in your astral body, you're in a very close to pure thought body. Not quite, because that's the mental plane. But the transmission through telepathy, once you learn to perfect it, because there is a little bit of a learning process, it becomes fairly easy and fairly intuitive. And the communication transmits pretty accurately. Unfortunately, when you return to your physical body, things become a lot more difficult. The physical body is not designed to efficiently and reliably allow you to communicate on a telepathic basis. Now, when I've had enormous amounts of projections where I've had a lot of discussions telepathically with other beings, I find that I can sense or read directly the thoughts of the people around me. I did experiments with ESP when I was about 11 years old. My sister was about 10, and we did some experiments because I was very much interested in telepathy. Because I'd been doing a lot of astral projection, I started to notice that I had abilities. And I sent her upstairs with a piece of paper with instructions to clear her mind and write down whatever comes to her. That's the only instruction I gave her. I, on my paper, put down a circle with a cross underneath it. In other words, a very simplified stick figure. And then I concentrated on sending that message in visual form. Telepathy works best when you try to send it in visual form. Verbal words don't transmit nearly as well. So when she came downstairs, she had a circle with a cross on top of it. In other words, an inverted simplified stickman. So I think you can relatively, agree that that was a pretty interesting result when she came down with essentially an upside down version of a figure that I picked at random without having given her any information as to what this thing might be. So evidently I did communicate that to her, and I've been able to sense the thoughts of others. So how do you do it? Well, you do it with a lot of practice on the astral plane. And when you return to your physical body, there's especially a period of time afterwards, up to a week or so, I find, where you have an ability to sense people's thoughts and to really increase that part of your being. But it's difficult to do it otherwise if you don't astral project on a regular basis. And as I said, the physical body does not help you in this process. All it does is obstruct the process. So it's always going to be a bit of a struggle, at least at this point in human evolution. Number 5, Tree's House ask, after your Haven experience, have you noticed any changes in your sensory or hearing capabilities? If you recall, I was healed in that crystal temple in the episode Return to Planet Haven. And they used sonic vibrations to do that. And it's interesting, when I was back for about a week or so, I was very sensitive to vibrations. When the refrigerator kicked on, when the dishwasher kicked on, Many of those vibrations seemed to me to be very irritating all of a sudden. Whereas before I had ignored them, now I found them very irritating. I would then start to play some Gregorian chants, which counteracted the negativity of those sound vibrations. So, yes, I did notice a change. Number 6, Shaw asks, do you know if a person can also get physically healed on the astral plane by the beings on their planet, the Havenites? I ask I ask a question similar to that during my experience. The answer was a little cryptic, but I guess it makes sense from their standpoint. What they said is if a being can make it to Haven on their own, then they will be in a position to help them. So that was the answer that I got. So I would say that's a very qualified yes. And keep in mind that I was a guest myself. Guests don't invite other guests to somebody else's house. So that's something that you've got to be very careful about. Because as a representative of Earth, I'm not a representative of a tourism board. So I was just there as a guest, and they were very kind to me. But that was their answer to a very similar question when I posed it. Number 7, Anthony Logan asked, were your visits to Haven in the present time frame or in the future? They were both in the present time frame. I didn't make any effort at time travel. So generally, when I don't make any effort, I tend to find myself in more or less the here now. Number 8, Kev Changu asked, I always thought that you had no difficulties leaving your body. I indicated at the beginning of this particular episode that it took me about 5 times to actually get out of my body far enough to go on this trip to Planet Haven. But then he goes on to say, from your words, it sounds like you kept getting sucked back in. Is that what happened? That's precisely what happened. Quite often, I have no problem getting out of my body. I generally find myself after a brief blackness at my old home, in my old bedroom where I was a kid in my parents' home. Other times I'll just leave my body and I'll be in a high energy state and I'll just go out and do whatever I want. Occasionally, I still struggle too. So, don't think that doesn't happen. In this particular case, I went out 4 times. Each time I got a little further before I got pulled back in again. And then finally, on the 5th time, through a sheer effort of will, I was able to push past this barrier that was trying to push me back in or pull me back in. And I was able to make it out and then go off and have my visit to the planet. But yes, even experienced projectors run into occasional dry spells where you just don't project for a period of time. Who knows why? And occasionally, all and others have trouble getting out and staying out. Who knows exactly why? Is it fluctuating energies, astronomical things? I don't know. At any rate, it still happens to me. Number 9, Kip Road asks, did the Haven inhabitants use sonic machines to excavate that crystal temple of theirs? Or did they produce the sound from their own bodies? I saw no evidence of machinery. All I saw was them generating this miraculous sound energy, which gave me healing. So I'm assuming that they excavated that building using some variety of sound which they can control, that comes from their particular bodies. So let's go with that. Number 10, Philip Roble asked, did the Haven people condemn you for eating plants? They asked me after we had scanned one another if it was true that I ate things that had been once alive. I don't think they really made a distinction between plants or animals. And keep in mind, on their planet, the dominant life form and almost the exclusive one were plants. There was some insect life, but that was it. From their standpoint, their basic objection from a moral standpoint was consuming things that had once been alive. So that was really their only concern. I don't look at it like they looked down upon me. If anything, they were just a little bit shocked. But I didn't sense any serious judgment. If anything, there was probably a little bit of sympathy, of you poor person kind of thing. I mean, that's once again, this is my interpretation as a human of the thoughts of an alien. So who knows? Maybe I was close. Maybe I'm totally off. Number 11, Vampiric Kai asks, many aliens seem to be more hive mind based than individualistic. Do you think individualistic consciousness races are more rare? I don't know if individualistic races like humanity are more rare than the hive mind type species. However, think about it. If you had to make a choice between helping a planet and a race survive and evolve as quickly as possible, which would be the most efficient? Would it be the hive mind, or would it be the highly individualistic species like humans? I mean, that's up for debate. It seems to me, though, at least from what I've experienced, that it's easier for a race to advance and to not exterminate itself if it has this, in air quotes, hive mind type psychology. We individualists might have an edge in innovation, but we also have a very intense negative, which is we see ourselves as separate beings, separate nations, and that translates to wars that are ever escalating, and the development of weapons that are ever escalating to fight those wars. So perhaps individualistic races aren't rare, but they have a harder time advancing. And they probably have a harder time not exterminating themselves. I have great hope in humanity and our individualism if we can avoid exterminating ourselves. So, potato. Number 12, Vaya, that's Vaayuh, asks, do the Havenites have any religion? Not as we would think of it. I would say their religion, in air quotes, is more of a unified philosophy of reverence for life and oneness with the cosmos. Well, that is the episode. There was a lot of interest in that return to Planet Haven episode, so I wanted to make sure I addressed all those different questions. There was just so many, and I wanted to pick the ones that I thought would be some of the more interesting ones, but they were all good, and the comments were great, and I was very appreciative. And hopefully, if you liked this episode, you'll hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, why don't you hit that bell? And by the way, 75% of you have subscribed, which is amazing. But I'd like more. Let's get it up to 100%. Why not? It doesn't cost anything. And keep those questions and comments coming. It helps us as a community to grow. And, it also helps me to put together some episodes at times. And there's nothing wrong with that. At any rate, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.